Welcome back to Survivor Series by Survivor Tribe. Survivor Series is a collection of interviews with real-life survivors where we chat on what it's really like to be a survivor, and they chat on their own personal journeys from abuse to healing. And if you're susceptible to triggers, please keep in mind that there is highly sensitive content in these interviews. In this interview, I had the pleasure to sit down with Allie Schwab. Allie is a survivor of domestic abuse and rape. In the interview, Allie talks about how the abuse started small and then started to escalate, when the abuse took a very public turn, when she started to realize just how unhappy she was, the truth about what healing is really like, weighing out the conflict between divorce and her religious beliefs, and how healing is the sole responsibility of the person who needs to be healed. Allie also shares her top 5 ingredients for healing and what she feels every person who loves a survivor should know. If you would like to connect with and learn more about Allie after the interview, you can find links to her social media channels in the description below. And if you're new to Survivor Tribe and you'd like to learn how to find your voice and heal after abuse, subscribe to my channel and don't forget to click that bell notification so you don't miss any new content when I post it. And if you're feeling generous and you'd like to help keep Survivor Tribe up and running, please contribute to our GoFundMe. The link is also in the description below. Now on to the interview. Hi everyone, welcome back to Survivor Series by Survivor Tribe. Today I have here with me Miss Allie Schwab. Allie is a survivor, a social worker, a writer, and mental health advocate. Welcome to Survivor Tribe, Allie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, so happy to have you here and have you share your story with us. So I guess just to kind of kick off, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself and the abuse that you endured?
For sure. So like you said, my name is Allie. Currently, I'm a social worker. I work in the domestic violence field in the city that I live in. So people often ask me, oh, you're a survivor. How do you do the work that you do? So we'll kind of maybe get into that little piece a little bit later, but I'm really excited and happy to be able to have healed enough and grown enough to be doing what I'm doing. And also I've gotten in the last year or so more into writing. So speaking up about my story, helping other survivors, helping people who know survivors, support survivors as well. That's really a passion of mine. That's something that's important to me. And also I'm an avid traveler and like humanitarian. So I go to Africa, specifically Tanzania, quite a bit. And right now, my biggest passion, my biggest desire is to have my own non-for-profit over in Tanzania to support women who are going through or have gone through domestic violence and sexual assault in Tanzania, because it's very minimal support over there. So it's just something I'm really passionate about and on my heart.
Where did the connection with Tanzania come from?
Well, so my background, I'm half South African, so I've always had a passion for Africa. Grown up with culture, all that good stuff. So I always knew that that's something I was passionate about and I want to go back home, so to speak. But actually, maybe about 3-4 years ago, my boyfriend at the time, he had a friend he's a director of a school in Tanzania. And he knew I always wanted to go back to Africa and get experience and start working there. So he basically made that connection for me. I went, lived there for a short amount of time and just fell in love with the country. And so all those seeds of like passion, desire, and like, this is what I want to do just kind of started to blossom. And it's been growing over the last few years. And now I'm like, okay, you know what? That's a goal. I'm going to do it. So that's kind of how it started in a nutshell.
That's amazing. And I feel like that can happen, right? Like you just know when you know, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's a desire that doesn't go away. So I think anything that sticks with you for a long period of time, and it's almost, I call it a holy burden, where it's something I can't run away from. It's like, this is what you're meant to do. Mm-hmm. This is what you're doing. And even though I'm like, no, it's scary or it's hard, I'm like, well, there's no plan B. I can't think of anything else, So yeah. It's great.
Once you've found your mission, you can't run away from it.
Yeah,
it's
exactly,
like the universe won't let you. It's like, nope, no. That's what you're here to do. Sorry.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about the relationship that you had and
Sure.
how everything transpired?
Yeah. So I guess if we go back to 2007-ish, I was 19. Just finished a year of Bible college. So I was in music ministry at that time, kind of like, okay, I'm like 19, 20, venturing out, that kind of thing. At the time I was working at a Christian bookstore, and basically I met my now ex-husband. He had come into the store. We hit it off. We're inseparable ever since then. And just our relationship grew eventually. So I was 19 at the time. We got married at 22. And so young, but I grew up in the church, and as a Christian, like that's kind of the culture, is where we often can get married at a younger age. So I really didn't think too much of it. But looking back, I'm like,
Which church did you grow up in?
I grew up in the Christian church, but specifically it's a Pentecostal
Oh, okay.
denomination. So that's kind of like my background. And looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so naive. But that's often the thought that comes to like our heads when we're looking back at some of our decisions. But yeah, at the time, we had a lot in common. We both had he grew up for parts of his life in Africa. We had that connection, similar some missions, aspirations, those kind of things. And we were like kind of instant best friends, that kind of stuff. So I'm like, cool. Somebody kind of shares my vision. We get along great. So, but looking back, so I would say the abuse kind of started to form in the form of like name calling, so verbal, and that's
Okay.
often how it starts, right? So it was kind of like that underlying name calling that I thought nothing of it. I'm like, yeah, like I grew up as a tomboy as well, so sometimes the boys are like, hey, loser, like kind of that jokey.
Yeah.
But looking back, I'm like, that's disrespectful to call like the first
Yeah.
name he called me was dumbass, and I was like, my head was unsure how to take it, but it was really in a jokey, whatever way. Like, we were both in like the heavy metal scene. It was kind of just like, yeah, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, it's funny, I guess. I don't know. But it kind of like pinged my heart a little bit. But I was like, okay, well, it's a joke, obviously. And, um, and then it just,
How long into the relationship was this?
I don't really remember. I would probably say maybe a couple months in while we were dating, a couple months. Um, yeah, probably within a couple months. So, and that's an interesting thing to bring up too. So while we were dating before we got married, I feel like the signs or the red flags or kind of that growing or escalating maybe abuse was very minimal. It's
Mm.
kind of like a slow poison that sneaks its way in. That's kind of how I think about it because I didn't really notice it. I didn't.
Yeah.
And even if I did, I kind of brushed it off because I thought, well, nobody's that mean or nobody's actually
Yeah.
that toxic. Like I'm a nice
Yeah.
girl, like kind of that la la la. Like I didn't really know that could be underlying for something greater under the surface, right?
Yeah. And you don't want to think that anyone's even capable of something like that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Because I
Yeah.
thought, oh, I met like a good Christian guy. Like we're gonna be
Yeah.
happy and yay. Like kind of that like life is my oyster mentality. We're just grabbing life by the horns and everything kind of is exciting, right? But definitely, I would say we got married a couple years later, and then we were in each other's space all the time. The stressors coming out, but it wasn't the typical like we just need to learn how to live together. We just got to learn how to budget and have finances. It was like you you get this angry, and when you get this angry, okay, like it just seemed like there was a lack of control on his part. Like I kind of didn't understand. Okay, so the name calling is increasing. Um, the like emotionally withdrawing or then isolating me from family and friends slowly, and even trying to.
How, out of curiosity, how did that transpire? Because I mean that they say that that's a huge mark of a narcissist is that they
Right.
will try to isolate you from family and friends. Like, how did that evolve?
I
Devolve?
can, yeah, I can kind of think back to when we were dating. I remember one time my mom and my sister had a conversation with him, and I was in the bathroom. I'm just kind of listening, like doing my hair or whatever. And I think they kind of confronted him, like, we don't understand why maybe you are like this, or you're doing this, or maybe you talk to Allie like this, and all that kind of stuff. And I think he felt like, oh, like backed in a corner, like almost like caught in a way, if that's the best way to describe it. And I think he noticed like some members of my family kind of on him for certain things. So it's like, well, they're onto my game maybe. So if I start making her family look like the enemy, then she'll want to push them away. And that's exactly honestly what happened. He's like, well, your family's toxic, you know that? Well, your family like kind of giving me those messages. And I'm like, yeah, my family sucks. Like it kind of, like for lack of a better word, like my mind started to turn against my family. So then when I'm doing this to my family, then I'm coming closer to him because now we're on the same team. We're against these other toxic people.
The us
You're
against the world. Yeah. Yeah.
kind of mentality. And so looking back, I'm like, oh, that's horrible. But it's so slow and so subtle at first. But specifically when we were married, I remember, yeah, it turned way more into an us and them because I was out of my family's home, living with him. We had our life, and it just kind of grew from there, especially the isolation. So then there's nobody to really challenge him because I'm not giving him much of a challenge, right? So then it's like, if she doesn't go to those people that challenge me, that's probably what he's thinking. If she's away from the people that challenge me, then I kind of can do whatever I want with her. That's the best way I can kind of think maybe that
Yeah.
evolved over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much brainwashing and manipulation that ties into that, and I think
Yeah.
a lot of people will question domestic violence survivors. You know, why didn't you leave? And they don't realize
Yeah.
just how deep that manipulation and brainwashing runs.
Yeah. It's, and that's the number one question, especially like the women I work with today in I work in the court system, and it's often like those questions of why didn't you leave? Like, why would you get in
Mm-hmm.
a relationship with someone like that anyway? I'm like, well, they don't present themselves as like narcissists or manipulative people in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
He was very charismatic, very charming, the life of the party type personality. Well, that's fun. Everyone wants to be around that until you don't, right? Until it
Mm-hmm.
becomes like how the presentation of us and who he was in front of like my family or friends or the community was different than when we got home.
Mm.
Um, and that's like Jekyll and Hyde is the best way I can describe it. It's confusing. It's part of gaslighting too, where it's like, no, I wasn't really saying that to you. No, are you crazy? Why would you think that? And it's
It
like,
was just a joke.
it was just a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
yeah, that was a big thing. Like, why are you taking everything? You're so sensitive. Why are you so sensitive? I'm like, and you start to believe it. It feels weird for me to say it like years later. I'm like, oh my gosh, was I that naive? Did I fall for that? And
No, you were manipulated. You know, I think
exactly.
and I
Yeah.
think it's easy to be hard on yourself for that too. But you know, the fact of the matter is that you don't. I don't know how to phrase this. Like you don't have a true understanding of what is going on when it's constantly being
Yes.
put into your head. You really don't know the extent of the abuse until you're removed from it, right?
Yes.
Like you start to figure out so much more.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's that day in those little digs or those little seeds that you plant, like making the person feel like lowering their self-esteem, whittling away at their value, like those kind of things. That's how you can get control. That's how people can get manipulation over you. You're like, I'm going to attack this little bit, but it's always like millimeter by millimeter. It's never like meter by meter, because any of
Yeah.
us would be like, whoa, whoa, if it was like these loud, big, like hacks at who you were. But when it's like those little things, you're like, okay, it was nothing. Okay, that's nothing. Right?
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, and when you look at it just from that one specific thing or that one thing
Yeah.
that they said, in the grand scheme of things, people, you know, that it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. But then when all of that happens, it all adds up to something way bigger, right? So I
And I
think we
think,
say that
yeah,
to ourselves in our own heads, right? Like, oh, well, they were just joking. Maybe I am too sensitive.
yeah.
But they keep doing it, you know?
Right? And if you struggle with boundaries and asserting like your needs and your wants, you're like, oh well, it's nothing. It's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Or instead of like for me, it was hard for me to say like maybe I don't like that. Or it got to a point where I would start to challenge him. So then we have headbutting going on. But then I
Mm-hmm.
knew I had to be careful with how much I challenged him or how much I fought back, because I knew because he was bigger than me, built like a football player. Like I'm like one hit, I'm down. Like I knew what I was dealing with. But after a while, the passive or people pleasing that's going on, it doesn't work. Like it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
working. So I knew, okay, and I have a feisty personality anyway. So I'm like, listen, like now we're fighting. But
That's why I'm still convinced that you're a Leo.
I'm actually a Taurus.
I have to do your birth chart to
Yeah.
figure this out.
But that's the thing. Um, so the other question that often comes up is, why didn't you report? I never reported, ever. Throughout
Mm-hmm.
the 5.5 years we were married, not once. And first of all, I didn't think I had the option. I didn't know it wasn't. I didn't think it was. I didn't even know it was abuse for most of the time. I didn't know it
Yeah.
was abuse. So then why would I report abuse? I didn't know what was happening. Second of all, putting him in a place to be accountable or putting him in a place of him getting in trouble. Oh no, what's going to happen to me then?
Right.
It's the concept of if I hit him, it's coming back twice as hard. So whether that's like metaphorically speaking or physically, like I was never physical with him because I'm like, woo, you'll come back at me, even though it gets to a point where I'm defending myself and I feel like I almost have to get violent back because I'm just sick of being a doormat. But I knew it was going to come back twice as hard, and I knew if the police came to the house, when the police leave, I'm terrified because now he's angry. Now he's more mad than before.
Yeah.
Who's going to protect? I had to live in a marriage where I had to protect myself all the time.
And at this point, had you, I mean, you said like your family had noticed some things going on. Did they know the
Yeah.
extent of it at that point?
No, I don't think
Uh,
anybody did.
yeah. So
There,
then you feel like you didn't have like friends or anyone you could turn to as well?
not well. I had people I could turn to in a sense of like maybe if I was feeling frustrated, I just needed to go hang out with a friend, or but I don't really recall having conversations with friends or family about like I'm being abused or this is going on, because it almost like didn't register that that was going on. It was like this is
Mm-hmm.
just I'm working on me. So when I get better, when I become a better wife, he'll stop doing that. So I'm just working on me, or we're
Mm-hmm.
working on us, and eventually this will go away. But it never did go away. Hence why I left eventually, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I it didn't. I remember maybe 3.5 years into the marriage, I went to go see a Christian counselor, and I only saw her maybe twice. He only met her once, and I remember one session she said to me, she's like, Allie, I've only met your husband once, but he's a narcissist. This won't stop. You need to decide how much longer you're going to live like this. And I was like,
Wow.
what? Like my mind was like, whoa, that was like a tough love moment. I took it in. I was completely blown away because I'm like, in Christianity, we don't really do divorce, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not highly pushed or thought of as a good thing. So I was like, okay, that's not an option. To leave and to divorce is not an option.
Yeah.
But so I felt like this lady's kind of giving me like, there's a way out of this. What? So I kind of just filed it away in the back of my mind for later. And I'm like, I'm not really sure what that means to me, but that kind of hit a nerve, and I'm gonna just let it sit there and whatever it needs to do. That I think that was the first tough love moment, but honestly, it's always come from mostly professionals that kind of planted seeds in my heart, not people around me, because I don't think they fully understand or knew, and I think they didn't even know what to the little bits they did know. I don't think they knew what to do with it.
Yeah. And I think too, even if that were to happen and he got wind of it, he would
Right,
probably try to convince you that they were awful or evil or out to get him and make you
right.
feel bad for him, you know?
Yeah, kind of twist it and turn it, and then we're back at the square one all over again.
Now, did the emotional abuse, did it ever escalate to physical violence?
Yes, and it did. Sometimes to say it out loud, it's a little bit, only because like I never, didn't have all these black and bruises. I was never in the hospital. So sometimes we think physical abuse is like that. I'm going to beat you to a pulp kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't actually think, I'm like, no, he never physically abused me. It was emotional, mental, verbal. Because before I left, I was seeing a counselor at the time. She was like, but she challenged me. She's like, okay, so when he gets mad and like pushes you on the ground or pushes you on the bed or restrained me in public, in private, locked me in rooms, sometimes would drive like a maniac down the highways. I'm crying, begging him to stop, those kind of things, or just like throwing things at my head, punching the wall right beside my head. I'm like, stuff like that. I'm like, well, that's not physical abuse. And she's like, so if you did that to, let's say, your mom, like, is that okay? And I'm like, oh, no. So she had to kind of frame it like, actually, yes, he may not be like punching you in the head 10 times, but I mean, we've gone from name calling to now throwing things within inches of your head to hurting your animals. And that's often a sign people don't know is that now he's hurting my cat, not the other animals in the house, just mine,
What did he
you
do
know.
to the cat?
I don't even remember, like, and I loved my cat because he would attack him sometimes. Like my ex,
They
he used,
know.
they know. And so when he was attacked by this cat, he would just like either like throw it or kick it or just scream at it. Like it started off like that. I'm like, don't hurt him. I'm like, and then it got to a point we had a dog at the time too who, would not leave my side at some points. He's like, would call the dog's name and be like, come on, let's go. And that dog just looked at him like, no way am I leaving mom because you're mean. Like the animals do know, right? So
Yeah.
that's another sign too. I think like we tell a lot of the women I work with, like if he's hurting your animals, that's a big sign. Like, it's escalating at that point. It's a sign of
Yeah.
escalation. So, um, yeah, that wasn't good to say the least. Yeah, so it did escalate to physical abuse. I think it was really what actually jogs or baffles me a little bit is restraining me in public. Like, I just feel like that's ballsy because someone can probably see you. Like, but it's really subtle, like holding my arm tightly down like this because he's mad at me. He's like, I'm like, that's a restraint in a public place. What if someone sees you and they challenge you? Like, I just thought it got to the point where he would start doing things in public, in a public setting, or putting me down or starting to raise his voice in front of my friends and stuff. I'm like, people are starting to watch. I just think when it gets to the point where they maybe start to not care that it's in a public setting, it's no longer strictly behind closed doors. I'm like, okay, that's when things get to start to get concerning at that point, right? Yeah. So yes, there was physical abuse. Before I left, I remember thinking, I know he could kill me. So it didn't get to the point where, like I said, I'm in the hospital black and blue, but I'm like, I see enough escalation over time. The thought of this guy could kill me was enough in my mind, was one of the pushes for me to leave. But I often tell people who are not survivors, it's like the emotional and verbal wounds and abuse, I would almost take black and blue bruises over the emotional abuse any day, because I know those heal in a week or two. Yeah. But the last, I got divorced 5 years ago. The last 5 years of renewing my mind, building my self-esteem, becoming who I am today, 5 years later, has taken blood, sweat, and tears and so much intention to the point where I'm like, it's exhausting. People, I don't think they understand that you leave, but the wounds come with you. Yeah. But the healing afterwards, there were some days where I'm like, maybe it would just be easier to go back living like that, because to detox and to heal is sometimes more painful in some days than the actual abuse itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, when you can't, they say that you can't heal in the environment that harmed you. And when you remove yourself from that, I think you start to realize the level of abuse you are enduring, because now you don't have someone in your head saying it's not abuse and that everything's fine and this is normal. You don't have that rhetoric in your head, and you can actually sit and be quiet and listen to yourself. You can listen to your therapist or the community of other survivors or whoever you're conversing with. And I think that there's so much more that comes out that you learn that you have to deal with at that point, right? Like, you think you know when you get out, but then you realize so much more afterwards.
Like, you don't know the full extent. And that's why sometimes, like, people, like, if you're not a survivor, it's so easy to be judgy or ask those questions of like, why were you in that so long? Like, I work with women who, like, 20 plus years. How easy is it for me to sit there and be like, 20 years? Are you crazy? But I'm like, oh no, honey, I know what that's like. So I'm not going to sit here and judge you, but there's those barriers, there's those things that prevent people from leaving. And 20 plus years is that's a long time. My 5.5 years seems like forever, right?
Yeah.
Forever.
When, so like, what was the catalyst? What was that final moment that you were like, I need to get away from this asshole?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely was a process. Leaving is not a one-time event. It's totally a process. So thinking back, I'm like, okay, I remember thinking to myself, I'm living my life probably in a negative emotion, in a negative mindset, about 90% of the time. I'm feeling something negative and bad 90% of my day. That can't be normal, right? I was in school for social work at the time, so sometimes, like, I remember reading in the bathroom, in the back of the stall, it said, if you were in an abusive relationship, here are some of the signs. Take a number. I'm like, that's not me. But I sometimes remember being like, is that me? I don't know. Just, again, filing it away for later. I'm like, that's an interesting concept. So just knowing emotionally, I was starting to go downhill, slowly becoming aware of that. I remember some of my non-healthy coping was getting into, like, drinking a bit more, and sometimes often just alone. Like, sometimes he'd go out and I'm like, I just need to have a drink. Okay, a little too much, but there's some of those things. I'm like, okay, why are we increasing our drinking? Self-harm, unfortunately. Like, I had some issues with that as a teenager, and then I'm like, it's still continuing into my 20s. Why? Like, it was starting to bother me. I'm like, okay, this obviously something's not right. Something's not right. So I remember just probably 2 years before my catalyst appeared in my life, I was just like, God, like, what is this? I don't understand what I'm going through. Nobody around me seems to understand. Or like, there's, you know, other survivors, like, we're scared to share a story, or if we see something, I'm like, oh, I'm scared to speak up. Like, we don't want to be in other people's business. We don't want to like hurt somebody or get someone upset. So I feel like there's nobody around me to understand. So I'm like, I'm alone in this. I'm isolated. And I just remember praying, I'm like, God, please send somebody into my life that gets this, that gets me, that understands, because I'm completely on my own. I'm completely lost. So I would say Christmas 2014, I had signed up to go on a missions trip to Nicaragua with Samaritan's Purse. The people that do the Christmas shoe boxes. I don't know if they go around the countries and yeah. So we went to go do so that, cool. And yeah, it was neat. Anyway, so we went to Nicaragua, and there was she's one of my best friends now. She was on the same team as me, and I remember like, oh, we kind of got along, jived, and I remember, so we stayed in the same room, and I remember her mentioning to our other roommate something about, yeah, I divorced my husband about 3 years ago. He was abusive. Like, she just said very little, and I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. So at this time, I was, in total, I had been away from my husband for about 2 weeks because we were in Nicaragua. So it's removing myself from the situation, removing myself from the person. And so then me and her got talking, and eventually our stories kind of lined up, and I was like, wait a minute. And she's like, you realize he's abusing you. This is abuse. She kind of turned that light on full force in me, and I was like, what? And then I'm like crying. I'm like, oh my gosh. So it kind of just hit me. But then I also remember some of the men on my team and some of the local men who are translators. I remember thinking, these guys treat me more lovingly than my husband, and I just met them like 3 days ago. And I just remember being like, that seems messed up. Like, what up with that? Like, so kind of putting these pieces together. And I'm like, wow. And so we finished our trip there. I kind of got, had opportunity to talk with her. And I remember going home January, maybe 5th, 2015. And I went home, and I'm muddling around with this new experience and these new concepts and the possibility that this is not okay. And I met someone else with the same faith as me who was like, I left, I'm better now, things are getting better. And I was like, okay, I have options. Yeah. And I think that's a big thing that keeps sometimes people in toxic relationships. You think you don't have options. You think that this is it, right? So I was like, no, I have options. So probably 2 weeks, I muddled around with the idea. I saw a counselor, and she basically was like, yeah, you realize this is happening. And I just remember one day, I'm like, you know what? No, I'm done. Like, everything just kind of came full force. I'm like, and so my husband worked in and out of town. I remember he was out of town for a while. And I was like, I'm just done. I just, like I said, everything kind of came to a halt. I met someone who could like understand my journey, what I've been asking God for. I'm like, I need someone to understand. So she just empathetically came along my side and was like, you have options. And so I would say, so January 19th, 2015, he was coming home from a trip out of town, and I kind of called him. I was like, you're coming home for sure, right? Blah, blah, blah. Because we had 4 animals at the time at home. So I didn't want to just like leave and, they'll be hungry and stuff. Anyway, so I confirmed that he's coming home that night. So I asked what time. He told me what time. And I was like, okay, I've got X amount of hours, packed up all my personal belongings as much as I could fit into my little Toyota Echo. and anything that meant anything to me and my personal belongings, and just left my shell of a place that I once called home and went to go live with my friend. And things just have grown from there. But I came to a place where I'm like, nope. A whole big no. I was just done. But it took years to get there, but I was just done. Yeah.
Did your family know this was going on at this point?
Like where my mindset was at about leaving?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think I just learned not to share.
When did they eventually find out that you guys were broken up and you had left?
Pretty soon after the night I left, because my friend actually lived like a few blocks away from my family, which was nice. So, that's a very fuzzy time for me. I don't fully remember those details, but I think I just remember telling my parents, like, I'm done. Like, I'm divorcing him. Like, we're just done with this. And, I was scared to tell them, use the word, like the D word in my Christian home and Christian parents, but they were really understanding. And I think there had been enough evidence and what they had observed over the years for them to be like, okay, not to shame or
Good.
blame and throw the Bible at me or anything like that. They're like, okay, and yeah, I mean, I did lose some friends after getting divorced. I feel like I gained a whole lot more, honestly, from
Yeah.
leaving that life. I've gained more than I ever thought possible. Like, it's just the last 5 years have been sometimes really crappy, but really amazing as well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, in the healing process, I often tried to resort back to like the Allie I knew. Like, I just got to go back to the Allie I used to be. So there's like the Allie before abuse, during, and now after, but it's impossible. You can't go back to that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can you go back to that person? And
Well, I mean,
looking back
except for the fundamentals, right? There's,
right, the
and I feel
core,
like
the
when
core.
you're in an abusive situation, I feel like those fundamentals even get washed over and like, what's the word? Like watered down because
Right.
you're just dealing with so much crap. So you do kind of get that back, but I agree, man. You're a totally different person afterwards after that
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, no, like
Um,
the core of who you are, I think still sticks there, obviously. Like, I'm still Allie, but I'm like, no, I'm not, because it makes sense for me to want to go back to who I was because I understand that person. That person makes
yeah.
sense. But when you leave a situation, it's like, this is a scary new world. Like, I think of Aladdin, like, a whole new world, that song. like,
Yeah.
like literally, it's a whole new
But
world.
they were excited about it. This one's terrifying.
Yeah, and and to explain some of that like terrifying feelings. So I remember soon after I left my ex, I've always wanted a Lululemon sweater. I was like, I really want a Lululemon sweater, but I didn't always have like the money to do it. I was like, felt really restricted in what I could and couldn't do. So I remember maybe weeks or a month or two after I left him, I was like, I'm gonna go buy a Lululemon sweater. Like, now I can kind of think about me. Okay. So I remember going to the mall, bought it, found it, bought it, and just returned back to my car. And I just remember looking at it and I burst into tears. I was like, like, I couldn't, my mind was like, you did something for you. You had the freedom to do it. Now I'm completely overwhelmed with my freedom. Oh my gosh, like, I'm gonna have a panic attack. And it sounds silly. It sounds silly to somebody who maybe hasn't been there or just maybe doesn't understand because like you went to go buy yourself a sweater. Good for you. But I'm like, no, 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 no. You don't get it. I chose to do that for me.
Hmm.
I didn't have somebody telling me, well, why would you spend money on that? Well, why would you want to wear that? Well, I didn't tell you you could do that. Or like, those kind of things. It was completely overwhelming to start making choices and to start doing things
Hmm.
to redesign my life, to redesign who I am as a person in the way that I want to.
Yeah.
You know, big
Yeah,
deal,
for
big deal.
sure. I love that. Did you experience any retaliation or anything from him after you left?
Uh, yeah, mhm. Honestly, he just stopped, I guess, not stalking, kind of like trying to talk to me, trying to get to me 4 years after. Took
Four
about four
years
years.
after. So not even like right when you left.
No, like well, yes, yes. Like, I remember one time I came home from work and his truck was just sitting there waiting for me to come home, rolls down the window, he's like, hey, and then just, I don't know, I can't really remember the interaction, but he had brought some more of my stuff and just kind of left on the front porch and tried to have a conversation with me, tried to intimidate me. He's like, yeah, you're going after my money. Yeah, this kind of stuff, just trying to like, start something. And I just remember being like, and then my friend who I was living with was like, I think I see him driving around the block numerous times. Like, we weren't sure, but I remember talking to the police at the time. I'm like, is this enough to file something about harassment, blah, blah, blah. And so I just started to try and educate myself. Looking back, I wish I would have reported because now that I know more about like law enforcement and stuff with my job, I'm like, he probably would have been charged with like four different charges.
Wow.
Um, but I mean, I didn't know at the time. That's fine. That's neither here nor there. But yeah, so he um, mostly online though, like trying to email me, checking up on me, those kind of things. Sometimes getting through my family members indirectly. So I would say he really didn't stop. It took a good 4 years to kind of, for him, I think, to just give up. And that's often the time where I think, excuse me, survivors they don't know you're higher at risk during after you leave, and sometimes a year or so after, because when you leave, what does that tell them? Tells the abuser, I've lost control, I'm losing control. Now I need to hire measures to get this person back. I don't feel like anything was really, like, I didn't really feel in danger, or like I was really in danger from him after. It was more like that constant, like, coming at me emotionally and through social media and that kind of stuff. With after a while, I'm like, I'm trying to heal and detox from you. If you're going to keep coming at me, it's upsetting. Like, stop.
Yeah.
So that kind of happened. And then I do remember emailing his parents and saying, this is the reason I decided to leave your son.
Wow.
This is what was going on. I just, because I loved them. They were good people. And I just want you to know. And I basically got the message back of, we don't believe you. And I was just like, okay. So that's something I had to accept, that not everyone believed what I said. I mean, I can maybe understand it from the perspective of it was their son, and maybe parents, I mean, that's hard for a pill for a parent to probably swallow. But I'm like, I just need you to know, like, I wasn't this like crazy girl or anything. Like, legit, this was what's going on. So
Yeah.
I had to let that go for sure.
Well, I think narcissism runs deep too, right? It doesn't come from anywhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's part of it too. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. You mentioned a little bit about some of the things that you were doing to cope during.
Right.
What happened afterwards? Like, let's talk about the healing journey.
Yeah, the healing. Okay.
Like, let's talk about where it started and where you're at today.
Okay. So, yeah, when I left, I went to go live with a really good friend. She was a fellow social worker. She really should have her own private practice as a counselor. Like, she was amazing. Like, I remember having, like, so just a lot of talking then. I started off with a lot of talking to trusted friends, starting to talk to my family. It really helped to live with somebody who, like, I would sometimes tell her the same fears, the same thought, probably 5 times a day. And she never was like, Allie, like, can you stop? We've been talking about this for 6 months. Like, are you never? She was always like, okay, let's talk about this again. Okay. So it was like, I'm going to start talking about it to people that I know aren't going to judge me, turn me away, those kind of things. So that was great to put myself in an environment. Like, even her house was peaceful. She had kids that I could interact with. She was a good listener. I'm like, I'm putting myself in a safe, non-chaotic environment. That's one good step. I'm starting to talk about it. That's another good step. I'm a very big lover and believer in, like, counseling and therapy. So I knew that works for me. So I honestly saw a counselor therapist probably the first, for sure, 4 years after. Like, not every day or every week. So it dwindles right after. When you get more and more healthy, you kind of can gauge how much you see somebody. But definitely counseling really helped me a lot, for sure.
How did it feel going from such a chaotic situation, chaotic living environment, to a safe one, like, that quickly?
Yeah. It was scary. My mind didn't know how to function. It was like, okay, so I don't have to come home and sit in the driveway and prepare myself for whatever is on the other side of this door. Okay, cool. Like, it's like those little freedoms. I can, like, make decisions, like I said before. Just because I removed myself from the chaos, my mind, my body, my spirit didn't understand that we were out. It was like still functioning as if I was a victim and I still do to this day, sometimes really struggle. I'm like, okay, those kind of things. Like I have my days still, but it was like I was vibrating still on this victim frequency, and it took years for me to calm down, mental health to calm down, to start addressing, like, because I'm a big believer, you have to heal holistically. So for me, it was, okay, I'm going to start with my mind. That's where I need to start. I need to refresh, detox my mind. And then I'd make goals for myself. So we're going to start, like the counseling, get my mind on straight, because I was living in fear, fight or flight all the time, fight or flight. And that creates anxiety, and that creates, like, the PTSD. is very real. So I'm like dealing with that. So it's like we can start there. And then eventually this year was, or beginning of last year was finally for me to start addressing like my body. So I'm like, now I feel comfortable working out and changing my diet. But it took years. I had to address like the mind, body, spirit of it and just really be patient with myself. Because there are some days where I'm like, what is wrong with me? This is too hard. Because I want to just go back. I want to be able to live peacefully. I want to have relationships with people without thinking that you have a hidden agenda.
Yeah.
Why are you being nice to me? Oh, you want something.
Yeah.
You have underlying motives. I want to be able to not live like that, or to be startled by a noise and literally want to cry because I'm terrified of what's behind that noise. Like I still struggle with that honestly to this day, but
I was going to ask you that, like, what are some of your triggers? Like, what are some of your triggers, and how do you deal with them when they come up?
So today, currently, sometimes with my job, that's the challenge of being a survivor and working with victims and survivors is I might either hear someone else's story that's really close to mine or read a report that's really graphic, or I will meet maybe somebody who has a similar either mannerisms, personality, or abusive strategy as my ex, and that'll just kind of just like take me back. And I'm very self-aware. I've gone to a point where I'm very self-aware. I can tell if an anxiety attack is coming on. It's like my body starts to say like, we are feeling unsafe. We are feeling backed in a corner. And sometimes I can like hold off. It sounds weird. I can hold off that anxiety attack until I'm like, I don't know, panic attack until I'm like alone or whatever. I can feel, I can read my body pretty well. So I know how to kind of deal with it. But for me, and sometimes I'm so triggered where I can't maybe eat the rest of the day. Like if I'm stressed, I kind of stop eating. It doesn't happen a lot, but once in a while, it's like I kind of just go into, I feel my mind is just alerted, you're unsafe, you're unsafe. So I have to do things like talk to myself. You're not actually unsafe, Allie. That person just reminds you of this. Remember, like a lot of self-talk. It's gotten to the point where my body wants to freak out, but my mind can take over. And the logic takes over. I'm no longer living strictly emotionally anymore. It's like, no, you're not in danger. So then you can start to calm down. Yes, maybe I can't eat the rest of the day because my body's freaking out, but mentally I can recalibrate after a few hours. That's that good. Kind of thing. So there's still like PTSD, that stuff that I go through. I'm really sensitive to noise or sudden movements that I don't know where it's coming from. I sometimes tell my coworkers, like, I know sometimes it's funny to like startle each other or like, just to scare each other. I'm like, maybe don't do that to me, because I literally would probably burst into tears because it just freaks me out a lot. So some of those things, I'm really sensitive to like body language or tone of voice, especially in men, where I'm like, what does that mean though? Like maybe what you tell me, I don't take it for face value. It's like, well, what's the meaning behind what you're saying? Okay. Because obviously you're probably trying to manipulate me, aren't you? So sometimes that still sneaks in, and I have to remind myself, not everybody is manipulative prick. Like, not everyone's trying to get something or use and abuse me. So it comes back to self-talk. What have I learned? Who am I? Not everyone's out to get me. And sometimes, yes, it's exhausting to live like that, but it's not every day. Where before it was living like that every day. It's not every day anymore. So that's like progress. We can do this. And I think honestly, the rest of my life, things will come up. It gets less and less intense, the triggers, and the hypervigilance gets less and less intense. But I would like to think that it'll just all go away. Like I'll never be triggered again, but I kind of don't think that's gonna.
Yeah, I know it's so unfortunate. But I agree with that it's much more of a journey. Do you think it's the triggers are lessening, or do you think that the way that you cope has gotten better?
I kind of think both. I kind of think both. Like the way I cope is definitely a lot better. Things like I said, like working out and eating right, and just like self-talk, the renewal of my mind has really been probably the biggest thing in healing. Whereas like, when you've been in a manipulative, abusive situation, it's like the mind has been really attacked the most out of anything else. So I know that's been just a really big thing for me. And I tell people, that's why people can live as a victim for the next 10 years, even after they leave. You will live as a victim unless you really start to change that mindset. And yes, it's scary. It's scary to start changing things. And sometimes, and it's uncomfortable. So I think we live in a culture where it's like, pop a pill, drink a drink, go do this, you'll feel better.
Yeah.
Okay, great. But the core of like what's going on and some of that pain and hurt doesn't go away with pills and other things. You have to address it, and you have to feel yucky for a time because it's going to hurt.
Yeah. The only way,
You know?
what is it? What's the quote? The only way to get through, wait, the only way to get through it
is through it. Something like
I messed that up. The only way, you can't go around it. You have to go through it.
Yes.
Right. And
yes.
I think that every survivor that I talk with, they all had a phase where, they were trying to mask.
Yeah.
Which
is normal. Which is normal. I don't want people to feel shame. Like, oh, I'm just not getting it good. Like, I'm just not making progress. Or here I am, like, getting drunk again because I hurt so much. It's like, okay, not about self-shame. Yeah. We all, like, we're going to be in those seasons of just like, this hurts and I don't want to deal with it. Mm-hmm. Like, that will happen. It's just a matter of, are you going to stay there, though? Are you going to stay there for 5 years?
Yeah.
Or are you going to kind of make decisions to try and get out of it step by step?
Yeah. And I think we take setbacks that way, too, right? I could have like the best couple of weeks and then a couple of days and I just feel like shit. And it's very hard to get out of that mentality. Like you get kind of sucked back into it, And it's very easy to think that you're not making progress when you have a setback, when you're really just having a little bit of a setback.
Yeah. Or it feels monumental, right? It's like anything recovery, whether you're recovering from like addictions or like anything where you have to heal and deal, it can be very discouraging to have a setback. It's like, well, what's the point now? Because I feel like I've just taken maybe a year. I feel like I've set back a year. Really? Mm-hmm. But, that's why it's about we're resilient people. People are resilient and we make choices, intentional choices to move forward, intentional choices to start healing. No one's going to do it for you. It was not your fault that you were abused, but it's your responsibility in your healing. Right? So you're going to sit there and blame and shame yourself or others. I'm like, well, I can't, I tell some of the women I work with, I can't really help you, until we start acknowledging the fact that you can do maybe this one step today that'll help you move forward. Right? Yeah. We have to take responsibility. Like it's just the way it is.
We do. At a certain point, you do, definitely. I think that there's a window of time where you can sit and feel it. Right?
It's grieving. You have to grieve. You've lost part of yourself. You've lost, let's say, a relationship. You've lost, like for me, I lost my animals, a husband, a home,
the
money.
Animals part. Oh, right through the heart too.
I lost in-laws. I left with just my personal, I lost a life. So yeah, it's like you kind of deserve to grieve. Everyone deserves to grieve. You have a right to grieve. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it just becomes a problem when this year goes by, that year goes by, the next year goes by. It's like, but you also deserve a better life. You also deserve to live the way that you want. So,
and I think that's a big part of it, though, is convincing yourself after being abused and being told that you don't deserve anything, convincing yourself once again that you do deserve that and you do deserve happiness.
Yeah, and that's a process.
Oh my God, it's such a process, a long, painful process. Where are you at, if you don't mind my asking,
Sure.
Where are you at with dating? Are you comfortable dating again?
Yes. So actually, I did have a boyfriend after my husband after a time. That relationship ended over a year ago, which looking back, I mean, it was a good thing. But I probably will admit that I probably started dating probably too soon after my divorce, but I was like, well, okay. So it was just like really experimenting, like who I am, what's going on. So yeah, I did have a boyfriend after him. So now I'm in a place where I feel good. Like I feel really secure in who I am, what I want, where I'm going. I'm probably the most confident I've ever been in my life, which is like really great. I'm like, you have to get to that point. I'm in a point too where like I'm okay being alone. I have the personality where I'm okay, like, I don't know, I'm just a little bit of a hustler. So I'm like, I'm going to go travel. I'm going to do this. It's like, I desire to have a partner and stuff. I'm like, but I'm going to wait till you complement my life because I don't actually need you. I just
Mm-hmm.
want some. So, in a really good mindset, really good place in multiple areas of my life. So I feel like, hey, I'm ready for this. And it it's not easy though. I still get anxiety because like I said, I'll have moments where I'm like, maybe I'll be talking with a guy and he maybe say something. I'm like, what do you mean by that? Why did you say that? He's like, it's a purely probably normal thing to say, but my trauma mind, I'll call it trauma mind, will take it as like, you meant something else. And I have to catch, sometimes I'm so hyper vigilant. I'm like, I'm trying to catch all the red flags, trying to assess the situation, like,
Yeah.
because I'm not going to end up with another like horrible person. So I still have that guard. There's I need to guard my heart in a healthy way. But I sometimes catch myself with like walls up, like, like you
Yeah.
better be worth a wall coming down. So I've learned enough to guard my heart, I think, appropriately. But I know there are times that it's a bit much and it's going to take a lot to kind of chisel through it because when you get burned, you don't want to get burned again. Not
You don't
like
want to go
that.
through that pain. Yeah. Once
No.
is enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once is enough. Have you had any experiences where you maybe went on a date or two with someone and you could realize pretty quickly that it was maybe repeated patterns from the past, or that person maybe a narcissist?
Um, Maybe not so much like a date with somebody, but it's almost like I can usually tell pretty quickly interacting with somebody if
Mm-hmm.
you're like what your level of toxicity is. Like if you're like, oh, you need your own healing, or or you're kind of toxic. Like I feel like I can pick up on that pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I still sometimes worry about it in a sense where when you start to get feelings, when you start to feel the feels, I'm like, oh no, that means I'm being vulnerable. My guard's coming down.
It's
Because
scary.
and it is scary.
It
That's
is
why I still
scary.
like I have one of my best friends like bounce things off her. I'm like, so I like this guy, so this is happening. So it's good to have like people in your life that you can kind of hold you accountable. I have like some older women in my life where I'm like, hey, so like just to have to somebody like a big sister or another or like multiple moms or a big uncle or something, just to be like having my best interests and for me to be like, tell me if I'm being a little crazy, like
Mm-hmm.
too hyper vigilant. And I have a friend, she's like, he probably just meant this and was looking out for you. He didn't mean XYZ. And I'm like, okay, like,
Yeah. Well, I
you
mean, I
know,
think a big part of that healing process too is learning to trust your own judgment.
yes, that's
You
that's
know.
that's exactly right. Where it's like,
Um,
okay, Allie, you have learned a lot. And a big thing is boundaries, learning boundaries, and to voice my needs and my dislikes. I'm like, if I can do that with somebody and they respond in a healthy way and they respect me consistently over time, I'm like, that's good. That's another healthy person.
you're like, that's
Versus,
husband material.
hey boy, no. But yeah, exactly. Like I have a guy that I'm interested in now, and like over time, he's proving to be like, wanting to understand. Um, where are you coming from? Like, please tell me if you're triggered, or can you explain a little bit more of these things to me? Because sometimes I honestly say things that are just really not, you shouldn't be worried about it, but you're taking it and you're blowing it out of proportion. Like, I just want to understand why. And then I do my little test. Sometimes I'll be like, I'm going to put this boundary up just to see how you respond. I'm not saying maybe that's always the best way, but I'm like, I want to know though. I want to know
Yeah,
that
for
I
sure.
can I can have boundaries and I can voice things that are in assert things that are healthy. And if you can return that healthiness and we can do this in a healthy way, that tells me that you're not an unhealthy, toxic person that's just out to use and abuse. So it's really kind of like experimenting and getting to know what different types of people are out there and just like different type of guys. Like I kind of last September started, more to talking to guys and getting a feel. And it's just interesting to slowly start learning and being like, what's safe, what's healthy, what do I like, what do I don't like again, right?
Yeah. How
Yeah.
long do you wait before you open up about your story to someone that you're interested in?
I don't actually wait too long. I don't really
Mm.
go into like hardcore like and back in 1995. Like I don't
You
I
don't whip
don't
out the
really
timeline. You're like, here, this is
read
everything you
this.
need to know. Here's a report from my therapist.
right? Like I don't do that. It's interesting. Sometimes it just organically comes up within a couple interactions. I kind of judge the person. Like some people are really open. I'm a very open, transparent person. It's also my job. Like I'm used to talk. I live a life of domestic violence and sexual assault and police and court like all the time.
You're so used to talking about it, right?
I'm so used to talking about it. So I have to be careful because a lot of people aren't. But honestly, I feel like if this person is sincere enough or can handle just a little taste of, or the question often like, when was your last relationship? Or how long, blah, blah. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. And then generally guys have been pretty good. Like I really haven't run into a lot of guys who are like, whoa. Because my biggest worry was, starting to get to know like other Christian men. I always thought they're going to hear the word, oh, I'm divorced, or I was abused. They're like, oh, well, I don't have room in my life spiritually for a divorced woman. Like I always thought that I would have a negative label on me from Christian men. But honestly, in my heart, I'm like the mature ones that know that we all have a past and we all have a present and a future. And I intentionally try and work on myself, and I'm always growing and evolving. I'm like, a mature, good guy is going to understand that. And he has his own baggage, so don't judge me,
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
I feel like that's kind of my gauge too, where I'm like, you know what, if I'm going to share my story and you're going to have a bad reaction to it, then you probably weren't my dude to begin with. Right?
Like,
I'm like, comes with a lot of baggage. If you can't handle it, we should just settle this right now.
Right? Because big scary words like domestic violence, sexual assault. I'm like, if you're man enough to handle it and know that I take responsibility for my stuff, I don't just sit here and like, here, boy, handle my baggage. Sorry. Like, I'm like, no, that's not yours to own, but just know, gonna be triggered. Just know that we may have conflict that you probably may not have with someone who's not a survivor, because I'm a little sensitive in this area. So you good with that or not? Like, really, some of those things.
I think it sounds like the person that you're seeing now has a really good understanding of how to handle that. Because I feel like most of the time not that I'm not met with support, but sometimes they just don't know what to say or how to interact. And I like the fact that he was like, help me understand what you're going through right now. It's so healthy.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's pretty mature, very mature and patient and wanting to understand it. Like, honestly, I've even said, hey, I have this article up on this website, or I have this podcast interview. Honestly, if you kind of want to check it out and actually get a little taste of where I'm coming from. And he's done that. And
that sounds terrifying to me.
Well, I wasn't like on the first interaction or anything.
You're like, first phone call, you're like, you should look me up.
Google me. Which you probably, we all probably
already did. Yeah.
If I'm comfortable enough, then like I said, it's already, some of this, my story is already on social media and on some internet sources anyway. So what am I, at this point, I'm like, I'm in my 30s now. I'm like, dude, are we doing this or not kind of mentality. Like, you accept me for who I am or not. You accept me who I was like 10 years ago and who I am today and who I'm going to be. So I just feel like we're grown-ups now. So let's kind of really have a healthy conversation and really decide what we're doing. And I've become really like, after my experiences and through my healing, I'm like I said, more confident than I've ever been, assertive, very sure of myself. Let's be adults and talk. Let's have conversations, like in my job, in my personal life. And like that has come, in time. And I didn't fully know how much I've evolved. And one story this happened last February. I was in a coffee shop actually just with this guy who I'm like, it wasn't really a setup, but it kind of was. Anyway, so I'm talking with him, just explaining, I'm Allie, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't know there was a girl sitting right across from our table. And she, I didn't know she was kind of listening. And because she had her headphones on too. So I thought maybe, she's just chilling.
Stealthy.
Yeah. Right. So blah, 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 blah. And so she had got maybe an hour and a half. I'm still me and this guy are still chatting. She gets up to leave and she kind of just goes beside our table, puts this little note on the table and then just leaves. And I'm like, what? And so I open it up because he's like, what? Do you know her? I'm like, no. And so I read the note. Actually, I have it hanging right there. The note, and it basically said like, "Hey, girl, I just want you to know that you radiate so much positivity and confidence, and that I really hope that date works out for you because you're like basically like you have like this queen vibe, and you really know what you want, and whatever." She's like, "I hope one day I can get to that level of where you're at." And I was like, "What?" Like a complete stranger went out of her way to say like, "I recognize who you are, and you just radiate so much positivity and goodness." I'm like, "Oh my goodness." And I cried because I'm like, "Honey, I wish you would have left me your phone number or something, because I want to tell you that it has taken me years to get to this point, and I've had to cry my way through it so much." But it was just an interesting story of when you do start to heal and you evolve and evolve. It's like people then start to notice you're not like maybe as withdrawn, timid, sad all the time, not wanting to look people in the eye. It's like you can get to that point where other people notice and they're like, "That's a healthy, awesome person. What has she got? I want some of that."
What a good human. That is I love that story. I love that.
Yeah.
I one of the things I wanted to ask you, what would you say, and I know that obviously every survivor story is different, and every, the ways that we cope and heal, it's all different, but what would be your best advice for someone who just got out of a domestic violence situation? What would be your best advice for rebuilding your life?
Ooh, that's a big question. It's a good question. It's a big question. I think, at the beginning, you're still, like I said, in survival mode. You're trying to figure out what decision did I just make? I made the decision to leave. That was scary. What does my life look like now? There's so many pieces to put together. It's often hard to know where to start, especially if you have kids. So sometimes I think, and this is what I tell a lot of women I work with, sometimes you just need to kind of keep surviving mentally. You have to do things like, now where are you going to live? Money, kids, custody. Some of those things have to be met, because it's hard to think about, how am I going to change my mindset? Or I want to start working out. How am I going to treat my body? Those are things that can come later. Let's work on how you're going to meet some of those core needs, because often women may not have access to a bank account, money. There's problems with like sharing access with children. Like some of those things need to be met, and it's hard. So it's like, okay, now reach out for support in your community, in your city. What are things that are available to survivors that you can access? Where I live, there's things that we have the Fleeing Abuse Fund. It's kind of like a starter kit for women leaving, or I say women, we all know it's men too, but survivors leaving, they'll give you money for like a damage deposit on a new place, kind of like a startup fee for like clothes, food, those kind of things. So find out what is available in your community. Access a social worker. Access, if you need to, I don't know, get a parenting order. Those kind of things. Kind of, you have to kind of set yourself up for success in a way, and sometimes it's those like basic needs that need to be met first. So it's knowing that you're going to have to do a few things that kind of suck, like figuring out where you're going to live and all those good things, but then also knowing that you have to have grace for yourself. So we're going to take steps back, we're going to take steps forward. Build as much as you can, because some people, I know you've probably been living in isolation. You may not really have friends anymore. You may not really have family anymore, but maybe who's that one person that you can rely on to help you navigate for the first couple of months. Trying to build a support network around yourself as much as possible, because to heal and deal in isolation will set yourself up for disappointment, frustration, because that person, the abuser, is probably going to try and get back to you. It took me 4 years for him to finally shut up. Okay. So who can kind of bring you back to reality? Who's the one that could be there for you to cry with? Those types of things. So it's trying to get out of isolation and trying to meet some of those needs. And then when you feel like, okay, things are kind of stable, then start deciding, do I need to do counseling? Maybe I could take up a new hobby, because I can music, art, that I can release some of these emotions. Because and then the unction to want to like maybe go back to that situation, it statistically, women can often takes like 7 times for women to leave. Why? Because there's some trauma bond that I know that life. I don't know this life by myself. I don't know this life as a single mom. I don't know this life as a single woman, whatever. So it's choices of like, I need to learn who I am again. I need to rebuild my life. Those kind of things. And knowing that you're going to have to address mind, body, and spirit, it's going to take time to holistically meet some of those needs. That's why I'm saying often the basic ones need to be met first. And then over time, it's really just step by step. And I just cannot stress a good support network as much as I can, even if it's one person. Because like I said, I have people coming in like, I have nobody, Allie. I'm like, okay, let's brainstorm of one person. Even if it's a professional right now, who's that one professional you trust? Anybody? So
is that mostly too because they've generally been isolated from family and friends?
Yeah, and maybe family has tried to reach out and been like, we don't like your partner. This is the reasons why he treats you like crap, and those kind of things. And family sometimes tries for years and years to be helpful, and after a while, like any of us, we lose momentum or we get frustrated. Like, I give up. Like, you're not in a place, like, I can't you keep coming to my house black and blue, or you're keeping with the drugs, like you're not stopping, or you're enabling him. Like, we can't deal, because now we feel like we're getting pulled down as well. So I see that too, where the family gets so frustrated they just have to distance themselves. So that's why sometimes people, like I said, lose family and friends, because it becomes too much. The problem just gets bigger and bigger and starts to influence the people around us.
Yeah. Do you have any resources that you would recommend? I mean, I know that a lot of people who are in situations like that, if they're trying to pull together a plan, a plan to leave, to get all those things aligned, they're probably doing it secretively.
Right.
Do you have any resources that you would recommend for that?
I have some like websites. I'm sorry, I don't have them on the top of my head. We can maybe post it in the down below.
For sure.
But I know for me, like when I was trying to figure out what was going on, or especially after my sexual assault, I'm like, I don't understand this. I don't know what to do. So I found, and I think, millennials or generations, like, I'm going to reach out to the internet. So there's a lot of good things on the internet. So you can probably find things like safety plans. This is how, if you want to leave, this is a safe way of doing it. Or if you want to stay, this is how you can be safe. So anything from like researching like a good safety plan, or something as simple like educating yourself on whatever you're trying to figure out. I found for me, it started to make me feel less like a weirdo and more normal, because I'm like, oh, look, somebody else is going through this. Or look, there's information online about domestic violence. So I'm not actually odd. Like, this actually happens to people. And I think we're just in a culture and generation where we turn to the internet and we turn to social media. And I actually, for the longest time, hated social media. So for me to actually have like Instagram, and I'm having a website, I'm like revamping my whole website though, because I'm like, okay, we're changing everything. So it's down for the moment. But anyway, for me actually to start speaking up over social media, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is terrifying. Because I'm scared of social media, because I'm like, I don't really want to be out there, or I don't really want to be on video or a picture or those kind of things. But I remember thinking, going through what I was going through, searching desperately to be like, who can relate? Who understands? And so I see now, especially on like Instagram and Facebook and stuff, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's a community of survivors, just like what we're doing here. There's a community actually out there. And sometimes just joining a forum or joining a chat, or just liking a page and getting some of those memes or those like content coming at you, you're like, I'm learning. I feel less isolated. Your community, your person, your go-to could be someone online. I have people that I talk to who message me. I've never met them, but they're like, hey, Allie, what about this? What do you think I should do here? And I'm like, okay, sister, da, 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 da. So sometimes that is a good start.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I would agree with that especially Facebook for groups, if you want to go and express yourself, or, just have other people support you, I think Facebook is great for that. And there is an amazing support group on Instagram for survivors. And I get those same kinds of messages, and I've messaged people like that, and everyone has been so helpful and supportive. And I agree with you that social media is a very scary place. But I have found that when you are being brave and you're being open and honest and talking about these things, people are I've had mostly really great experiences on
Yeah.
social media in that capacity. Way
Right.
better than just when I was on there, you know, posting selfies and shit.
Yeah.
Don't do
No,
that anymore, PS.
I agree. Like the response has been pretty good too. I really would like to eventually start a community, either on Facebook or somewhere for like Christian women who we can talk about these things because it's still taboo in the church.
Mhm.
Um, like sexual assault, like, rape, domestic violence. Sometimes, like in the church, we still don't really talk about it. And I'm like, people, it's happening. It's
Mhm.
happening. So I think that was another barrier for me was like my faith. I feel like I wasn't sure how to work with that and made some of the decisions that I've made. First of all, I felt shame. I'm like, I'm in an unhealthy relationship. I should have known better. I should have been more whatever. I should have known better. And we all go through that. As a survivor, you all kind of talk to yourself that way. But I think sometimes for Christian women, but I should have seen that, or maybe I'm not godly enough, or some of those questions. Oh, I'm thinking of divorcing or leaving him. We don't do that. So therefore, I have to stay. Therefore, I have to figure out how to make my life work so that I can stay, so that I'm not a bad Christian. I'm not a bad woman. I'm not a bad wife. So I would like to eventually, because I don't want to take on too many projects at once. Sometimes I do that, but in the future, it's my goal to kind of have more influence in the Christian community and church and be like, it's okay to experience this. We are experiencing this. What are we going to do about it? And we don't need to shame ourselves even more because of our faith. Even let's say women of other faiths, like who are struggling with like, I don't want to be seen bad in my community. The culture plays a big role. I don't want my community to shun me or make me feel shame, or I don't want his family to come and like hurt me more. Like those are all things that happen as well. So I think it's speaking out, it's awareness, it's making sure you're safe too, because things happen when you start speaking out. People can attack you. That's another thing. Like as a survivor, if you start putting yourself on social media, knowing that it's a possibility that my ex or his family either have seen or will see some of these things. I get that. I'm careful of like what I say. I don't use ever names. I don't give like those details or whatever because I don't want I don't want trouble. You knew what they were capable when you were together. And sometimes you don't know that you're no longer together or you're removed. You're really not sure. You don't know if something's bubbling under the surface, just that's about to erupt. Like it's, I don't live in fear, I don't live in fear, but I am mindful. I come to that point where I don't live in fear, but I'm mindful. And I think you have to be to some degree.
100%. I also love the fact that I feel like some people in that situation, it could cause their faith to wane. And I like that. Did that do that for you?
Yeah. Honestly, for the first 4 years after getting divorced, I had a hard time going back to church. I felt like I was walking around with this massive black D on my forehead. Divorced woman, therefore judge me. And I felt like people were judging me, even like probably had no idea what my story was.
It's really all in our heads, though, right? Like we make things so much worse.
No, it's true, but I also knew that, and some of it was like, the church isn't perfect. We as Christians aren't perfect. But however, I somehow thought that I would be just really judged or turned away, and some of that's maybe from the unhealthy messages, like growing up in the church, like those happened too. And so the first like 4 years after, I had a hard time going back to church, and I really was like in and out. And I was like, I'm not ready to engage in this community with my people. Like I'm not ready for this. And actually just the past year, I've found like a constant, like consistent church family. And it's because when I first walked into that building, this spirit of like non-judgmental and acceptance was just like, I was like, I'm okay here. I'm safe here. And that could be anything. That could be like I said, a cultural group of people, just what's the word? Subculture too. Like maybe, if you're part of like LGBTQ community and maybe you're leaving and you're like, I'm afraid to engage with like my community again because it's scary, right? And so I'm in that place where I've kind of made peace with some of those things. And but there were definitely times where I'm like, the number one question, and I still struggle with this today. I'm like, well, God, where were you when that was happening? Were you actually there? And this is an interesting like visual that I believe he gave me. I think I left my husband like a month after a month. And I just remember being on my bed and crying. I'm like, God, why? Where were you? This sucks. Am I a bad person? Because I'm getting divorced and whatever. And I was just like lying there crying. And I feel like he was just like, he gave me like this picture of, it was like I was standing here on like water and my ex-husband was standing over there and Jesus was like in the middle. And and my husband was trying to like get at me, like being all aggressive and that kind of stuff. And I was just like, what? And it was almost like, yeah, like God was in the middle and he just like was like protecting me and he just put out his hand and was like, stop, she's had enough. And that like that picture just came,
Wow.
oh, I'm getting all emotional, but I just believe that was him speaking to me. He's like, she's done. We're not doing this anymore. And I was like, oh my God. And
You're
so
safe. Yeah.
I'm repairing. There's still areas of my relationship with God that I'm repairing because it still hurts sometimes. Or I'm like, yeah, where were you when that was happening? Where were you when I was raped? I don't really know. My head and my heart kind of know the answer. Like I know you were right there, but it didn't feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
Those, and I think that's questions people often ask and they get mad at God. They're like, you didn't stop nothing.
Yeah.
You know, those kind of things. But yeah, like I said, me and him are still hashing out some stuff, some trust issues and all that kind of stuff. But that's part of the journey. Any relationship with any person can go up and down, right? And
Yeah.
we have highs and lows. So I'm like, what would be the difference with God? So yeah, my faith has been a journey as well. And but my faith is the number one reason I am where I am today anyway. You
Yeah.
know? So I'm pretty open with it.
I like the fact that you're looking to the future too, and looking at
Yeah.
ways that you can help other Christian women have those open conversations. And what I was going to say earlier is that I feel like a lot of people, like you said, we all go through that process of where was God? Why wasn't God there? But
Yeah.
instead of just shunning that, you're rebuilding it and you're looking at ways to repair it. Like, so taking
Right.
your pain and like, how can I contribute this to the church to make the
Right.
church even better? That's a beautiful thing. It's very powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a journey. I'm hoping, like I said, I know as survivors, we know the pain and isolation that can come with not only the abuse, but the recovery. And I'm like, I don't want another, let's say, woman or Christian woman to suffer or feel so alone and feel like crap. Like it is your fault. We get that message from people who abuse us. It is your fault that you're being treated this way. I'm like, no, it's not actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's my whole social worky, social justice advocate spirit coming out. I'm like, it is no. Like when it becomes not, I'm no longer okay with this. So then I have to do something about it. So I don't want this topic to be a taboo in my community because it shouldn't be one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
just like my whole mission in Africa, I'm like, that's poking at culture. But there's cultural dynamics there. And there's other dynamics too, of course. But it's like, you know, some of us, I think we're made to challenge some of those status quos and to be those like hustlers and to be those pokers in a
Yes.
positive way, to be like, yeah, no, actually it stops now. Or
Yeah.
we're going to say something now. And I don't know. That's how it goes.
Yeah, I feel like I've come to just like the peace within myself of, and I know some people don't want to hear this or think of it this way, but I've gotten to a point in my life where I'm like, now I know why that happened.
Right.
Because I'm a loud mouth. I'm aggressive. I'm not afraid to back down. That's
Right.
why it happened to me. So I could go back out there and help other people who are going through the same thing, so they don't, like you said, don't have to be so alone and isolated, because what they're going through is already awful in itself, and then to add
Right.
isolation and all of those things on top of it just adds a whole other element of
Yeah.
trauma to it, you know.
Right.
So
Could,
I commend you for your bravery in doing that too,
oh,
because I'm sure
thank
you'll be
you.
met with some
Yeah.
pushback, you know.
I expect it. I think my my career as a social worker has toughened up my skin a little bit, where people yell at me. They're like, "And you did this. You people did this to me." I'm like, "Okay, you're mad at the system. Let's chill for a little bit." I'm mad at the system too, but I gotta learn to channel that. But anyway, yeah, I think over time, your confidence goes up when you heal. You get a thicker skin. You start to learn who you are, and that's very important. When you know who you are, You come to a place where you know who you are, whether this person accepts me, whether this person believes me, whether this person wants to listen or not. I know who I am. And for me, because of my beliefs, I'm like, I know who I am in Christ. So therefore, hey, this is how it is, and this is who I am. So you can listen or not. You can email me and be like, I don't agree with you, Allie. I'm like, okay, we can
That's
agree to
okay
disagree.
too. Yeah.
Right? Doesn't mean sometimes it doesn't irk me and I'm like mad. I'm like, delete. But
Well, been there.
but and that's part of that comes with the territory of being an advocate and someone who raises awareness and speaks out. It's like backlash. And often sometimes from people you love, and that hurts the most, right? But hey, when you're on a mission and you're stubborn like me, you're like, I'm sorry, I can't be quiet. I try.
Now the Taurus comes out.
Right? Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's I mean, it's so incredibly brave to do that. And again, I commend you for that. We are going to wrap up, but before we wrap up, I always ask a couple of questions to survivors, and like to put you guys on the spot.
Okay.
So like, as we talk about healing, one of the reasons why I started Survivor Tribe was to talk with as many survivors as possible from different backgrounds, because as we know, each experience is so different from one person to the next, and there's so many different factors that tie into it. But for your own personal journey, what would you say are the 5 most impactful things that have happened, or the 5 most impactful things in your healing process? What would you say that those are?
That have like influenced me the most in my healing? Well, like I mentioned earlier, my faith and my relationship with God has been my foundation. Yes, we've had our ups and downs. There's been times where I'm like, I'm not doing this with you. But I know at the core of my heart, I'm like, I know who he is, and I know that's a solid for me. So that's number 1. Number 2, good support network, friends and family. Like I said, I needed my good girlfriends where I can just cry with, who I can like rehash the same story, concern, fear over and over and over. Because when you're confused and you feel alone, and you need somebody, you need something. So friends and family, counseling and therapy has been really good. Sometimes like talking to somebody who's emotionally removed, like a professional who's not invested in your life in a personal way, and a good counselor who will tell you like it is, but not tell you what to do, but kind of coach you along and support you and love you in a different way than family and friends can. I had the same counselor for the last few years, so he's been really awesome. And then actually he's a male counselor, which I find very interesting, which I was hesitant of before, but it's been good. That's been a good journey. So counseling and therapy, setting goals and having a vision for my life and who I am. I mean, I'm naturally an achievement-oriented person, so I get restless when I'm not doing something. So even if it's a small goal, like I want to, I don't know, there's a time I was off work. I'm like, I want to find a new job that I love. That's a small goal. Or I want to start eating better. Like it could be small goals like that, or it could be like now my goals of like, I want to create my nonprofit organization in Tanzania. Woo! Monumental big goal. But
it's a good one.
Has to be something to work towards. Has to be something to look forward to. Because when you're in this pit of like life is despair, or I'm grieving, thinking of the future is like, oh, I can't even. So that's why sometimes a goal for tomorrow is better than nothing. I can I can strive for that goal for tomorrow. Maybe not 5 years from now, but tomorrow, because you can start somewhere. So goals and having a vision for my life and what I wanted to do really, really helped. And then I would say number 5, I'm a big like fitness health nut. So like starting to like work out and take my fitness seriously, and educating myself in nutrition and changing my diet. I didn't really change it very much. I'm a generally healthy eater, but I'm like, hey, I want my mind to be healthy. I want my spirit to be healthy, and my body. So that's why over the last 5 years, I've had to work at one at a time, or little bits of each at a time. And now after 5 years of being free from a lot of abuse in my life, I mean, it's been a journey to recover, because my sexual assault happened a year after my divorce. So I've had some compounded trauma, which is kind of, I feel like, delayed me a little bit. But like I said, knowing that I have to address multiple areas of my life, I think setting those goals and taking them seriously and knowing that I'm not going to meet them all maybe when I want to, having grace for myself has really helped me move forward for sure.
What is your preferred method for fitness?
I love strength training. I love lifting weights.
Yes.
I hate running.
Oh, I love running.
Okay, here's the thing though. I just started 3 weeks ago. I'm like, I'm gonna start running. I'm gonna see what this is like. It's a mental game with me. I'm like, there's no goal to score. There's no person to like tackle. I'm bored. But now I kind of
there totally is goal setting. Come on.
There is now. I understand that now because now I'm like, okay, how can I run this kilometer faster than last week? Like I'm kind of trying to make I see now why all the runners enjoy running. I'm starting to get into this world. But I do like weights because it's like there is that personal challenge, but I'm also like, because I am a fighter personality, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna like it just makes me feel stronger.
Like a badass, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's that mind, body, spirit. Like, I feel strong in my mind. I feel strong in my body. I feel strong in my spirit. So I kind of want things. I just want to feel strong. It's just fun. I just kind of like the challenge of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Weightlift. I feel like that's a common thing amongst survivors. And I think it's there is like a level of, I don't know. I just feel like there's like an extra power in it. Like an extra.
I think so.
Right. There's something about lifting heavy weights that you're like, yeah,
right?
I'm tough. Yeah.
And when you notice like your muscle tone is like coming, and I'm like, yeah, that's right.
The running will really help that too.
Yeah. I'll continue with that.
It's a journey. I hated it when I started, but eventually loved it. It started to become like a meditation for me.
Okay,
like
I can see that.
Private time. I'm not interacting with anyone else. I don't like to run with other people.
Right.
Mostly because they try to talk with you and I'm like, I'm out of breath. Like I can't do this right now.
So I'm in the zone. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, what would you say in regards to, like if someone is coming to me or coming to someone else and saying I was abused, like this is what's going on, what would be your best piece of advice for that person on the receiving end of that news?
Oh, so if someone's disclosing to me? Yeah, I would say if someone is choosing to trust you with their story and their disclosure, it might just sound cliche, but just watching your response. So I would say let that person talk. Just let them talk. Whether that's they want to talk to you for a minute and share a minute's worth of what's going on or an hour. Try not to ask those questions like, oh my God, what are you going to do next? What did he do? Why didn't you do this? Like, just be like, try to resist the urge to fix, to change, to, just generally like change the situation right now. Because I think sometimes we have that urge of like, okay, I'm going to help you. Okay. But it's more like, let the person just talk because they will feel heard. You may be the first person they told this to. So if you have a response that's like judgmental or scares them or those kind of things, it's like, they're like, this is why I don't say anything because look at what just happened. So it's trying to be non-judgmental and just letting that person share as much as they're comfortable sharing and try not to push for too much. I mean, if you feel like they're in immediate danger, like this is actually like, they could be like, their life's at risk. As a social worker, I'm mandated. I have to say something. I have to report it. Like that's professionally what I'm mandated to do. But yeah, like, and something as simple as like watching your tone of voice, your body language, your facial expressions. If someone's disclosing, like, for those of us who are not desensitized to domestic violence and violence, if someone's like, yeah, he did this to me, and you're like, and they're like it's going to throw them off. So it's just trying to be mindful. Of course, some of these things probably are scary for you to hear, but just trying to be like, okay, I want to create an emotionally safe space for you and a physical space. So just trying your best. We're not Superman. And then knowing like after someone discloses, okay, is there anything you can do right now? Even asking like, do you want my help with anything? Did you just want to listen? And sometimes it's hard, like I said, if someone discloses something where that maybe immediate action needs to be taken, like maybe the police do need to be called, you kind of have to make your best judgment, kind of work with a survivor of like, what do you kind of want right now? What do you want my support in? And then just knowing as a listener, if you're hearing stuff that bothers your spirit or your mind, like it's really hard for you to hear. Okay, so how can you take care of yourself after that? Because you don't want to go home and go to bed and be like, vicarious trauma going on. You're like, I'm really disturbed, and all weekend I'm going to muddle this in my brain and I don't know how to deal with it. So having your own good support system to be like, maybe you need to bounce it off your counselor, or maybe your spouse or something, to be like, okay, this is what happened. Like, do you think we need to act on this, or can you just debrief with me so that I can feel emotionally a little bit safer and let some of this go too? Because it's like self-care essentially. So I hope that kind of makes sense. I don't want to like say too much, but
no, that's great advice. I would agree with all of that. And I think, and I just said this yesterday too, in another interview, I feel that every time I ask that question, everyone answers it in their own unique way, but everyone essentially says the same thing. Like, it's best to listen.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And another thing I'm just really big on is try not to blame and shame the person. And I don't think people do it consciously, right? But there's things that are realistic in our culture, like there's like rape culture, those kind of things. There's blame and shame the victim. Our system blames and shames victims without sometimes us realizing we as survivors already put enough blame and shame on ourselves. Or if we've just left the situation, our abusers have already done that to us for, let's say, years or months or whatever it was. Please resist the urge to do that to me, because I'm already beating myself up over here. Those kind of things, like questions like after my assault was like, did you call for help? Why did you fight back? I'm like, did I fight back? Were you drunk? Those kind of questions. I'm like, I understand why you're asking that. I do. I understand kind of, sort of, why you're asking me that. But I'm already rehashing those things in my own head. So just so you know. So it's just trying to be mindful. You're not going to do it perfectly. You're not going to support someone else perfectly. But just try your best, really.
Yeah. And if you don't know what to say, or you think you're going to say the wrong thing, just don't say anything. Just listen.
Well, there's that too. Yeah. If you just need to be quiet for a good hour and just be like, okay.
Yeah. If you're internally asking yourself, is this the wrong thing to say? It's probably the wrong thing to say.
It probably is. Yeah.
And my last question is, what do you feel has been your greatest contribution to the world so far?
That's an interesting question, because like I said, I make goals and dreams that are like monumental. So I'm like, nothing, but I don't actually think that. I think just starting to share and open up, and especially online and on social media, because like I said, I was so against it. I was like, I don't like this world. I'm so mindful of how I interact with people, but I've had enough people, or some of the writing projects and book projects that I've been involved in, or I'm currently involved in, I'm like, okay, this is going out to whomever. I really hope somebody gets something from this. Like, it's just some of the feedback that I've been getting of, it really helped me when you posted that, or that video really made sense, or some of those things. It's just like, good, because like I said, I remember feeling so alone and lost. So if you can just add some clarity or some support to somebody, I feel like right now that's probably what makes me happy, and feels like, okay, I'm trying to turn this pain into power. But what does that look like for me? And it can be many different avenues, but I'm like, we're gonna turn some of this pain into power. So listen up.
You're doing an amazing job of it. And I really couldn't agree more that speaking out is a huge contribution, because you never know who needs to hear it. Right. And I'm a firm believer that no matter where you're speaking out, where you're posting it, the right person who needs it is going to find it.
Right. Yeah. You just, like I said, you never know. It could be somebody in New Zealand. I'm here in Canada. You don't know. And I've just learned, like, especially with my line of work, see people who are like everyone from homeless to low income to, like, I've seen doctors and lawyers and government workers. So it's, domestic violence, abuse does not pick certain people. It's not
Mm-hmm.
you're a target because of your skin color. You're a target because like it doesn't pick a certain type of person.
Mm-hmm.
It happens all walks of life to many different kind of people. So just knowing that you can make influence on numerous different people from numerous different walks of life. A lot of people have access to internet nowadays, right? So you can generally make a big influence and make community happen.
Mm-hmm. It's a human problem.
Exactly. It's a human problem. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Allie, it was so great having you on Survivor Tribe today. And thank you
Thank
for
you.
being so incredibly brave and sharing your story with us today. I really think that you're an inspiration, and I look forward to seeing what you do in the future.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you for having me. It's awesome.
Of
I love
course.
sharing, so it's great.
And if you guys want to find out more about Allie, you can connect with her on social media. I will leave all those links in the description below. And any of the resources that we were talking about earlier, we'll post those in the description as well. Allie, thanks again for joining us. And to everyone listening in, until then, see you next time.